Hello there, welcome to episode 7 of the Man Up podcast. I'm actually going to come to you on time, but we're about a week since the last one. The last one was about how COVID saved me. Very good, very good response. So I appreciate all the comments. I appreciate everything that you guys have done. Really means a lot to get that sort of feedback and questions. And I was out having a drink the other night, and somebody came to me and went, "I've seen your podcast, talk to me about how you deal with mental health and stuff." And look, I want to put something out there, because it was said to me the other day, you seem to have sorted out your mental health issues and your dark days. I haven't at all. I manage them a little bit better than I did, but even I get to a point where the fatigue or the overwork or too much in my head gets to me, and I start to have a bit of a meltdown. It's just trying to manage that and sharing that, and I'm still not an expert at that. And I don't profess this podcast is not me being an expert about stuff. This podcast is like my head coming out. It's like therapy to me. So I talk about stuff in it, and it helps me get stuff out of my head. So that's why this podcast is not me trying to be an expert, because I'm not, guys. Okay. The majority of the stuff that we get are positive, and I'm really happy that you guys enjoy what I do. Next week, I think we got the person from Talking Outside the Scrum on, Luke Brown. He's going to come on and talk about how his charity and that help people with mental health and depression. And then the following week, then, or 2 weeks after that, then gonna have a ex-business partner on. We're going to talk about how we built the business and stuff as well. And then we got other stuff planned. So yeah, today I thought we would talk about a couple of things that's been playing on my mind. One of them is Andrew Tate, and I'm not going to sit here and slag the guy off, because I don't know who he is, but I'm going to talk about my perception of him. It's in the car again, because it seems to be the time that I have the most time. I might even rename this podcast Man Up Podcast, the Car Journey Talks. And I'm joking, but I have the most time. I've been to sports day today with my youngest boy. Absolutely love watching my kids do their things. He did really well. He came first in the shot put, third in the sprint. I think he was fifth in the long distance. So proud of him. Very proud. I took time out of the office. Still did some work between his races. Can't completely shut off, but I had time to watch him and do stuff like that. So he's been really good, and I've had a great time. So I'm driving back now to my house and my office, and and I thought I'd have time to just do a bit of a chat with you guys while I do it. So Andrew Tate's one of them, because he had a bit of an influence on my oldest boy. He did. And then it got me to thinking about my parents and the way I was brought up. Now, I might upset some people in this podcast, and that's not in the way I say it today, but that's not my intention. My intention is never to do that, but I'm going to be open and honest in the way I feel, and the way I feel I was, and the way things were for me, and from my perspective. Not trying to dig at anybody, not trying to have a go at anybody, but just the way where I am, okay? So I'm going to talk about the biggest thing, right? Not making our parents' mistakes. So I grew up with my mum and my dad. My dad wasn't there a lot, but when he was, the dynamic in the house changed, okay? So my mum worked quite a bit, 2 jobs sometimes. I remember she used to like going to bingo. My older sister did a lot of the upbringing with us as well, looked after us a lot. But when it was just my mum, we didn't have a lot of money. Growing up, my mum did her best at what she could, working class, 2 or 3, whatever we did. So we've lived in a holiday park. We've lived in various houses, various areas growing up. I remember bailiffs knocking the door, and a lot of that was to do with the fact that my dad liked to drink. So it's a tough one, because I worshipped him growing up. He worked away a lot and would send money home for us, but then he also had a separate lifestyle out there as well, so money didn't always come back when it needed to. I've seen bailiffs come to the house, we've been evicted. Seen my mum and dad's house being repossessed. And then, I always thought, well, it doesn't matter, because my mum always brought me up, and it's not how much money you have, it's the family and what's around you. But then, the relationship between them was volatile. I don't, it's really bad to say this, but I can't remember a time where my mother and father was ever happy, ever. I can't remember a time where we had a family holiday where at some point through drink and possessiveness and stuff, it didn't end in massive arguments. I can't remember a time where at any point where we were just a happy family. Even on holiday, I remember we were in Ibiza once in 1997, and we were having a great time for a few days, and then one night my dad had too much to drink, and then it turned into holy screaming fetish where me and my sister are hid in the corner of a room because they're just going at each other and screaming and shouting, and my dad's trying to climb through windows, and it was horrendous. And I honestly think that seeing their relationship has massively affected my relationships, because I think my relationships are based on what I thought healthy was with my mum and dad. My dad also, by the way, was a serial adulterer. He had God knows how many affairs. My mum always took him back. But I worship my dad. I absolutely worshipped him. I found out about 10 years ago that my dad actually wasn't my dad. There was somebody else, which is another episode. That's another can of worms to open. But whenever my mum and dad were together and they would drink, it would always end up in arguments, and sometimes it would end up in massive violent fights, and that then makes you perceive that that's normal and that's what should and is happening. So yeah, it's flipping crazy, to be honest, that then set out what I thought was normal in a relationship. I become controlling when I was younger. I wanted to, because I didn't trust anybody, so I wanted to know who was doing what when they were doing it. When I was with girls, I wanted to know their movements, what they were doing. Tell me this, who are you talking to? There was no trust there. I'm much better now, and I got much better when I was married. But in the early days, I was messed up. I think, I'll be honest with you, because that was what I thought was alright. In the early, when I was younger, I very rarely drunk, because I seen what it turned my dad into, and it wasn't a very nice guy. And I think I always vowed. Well, at one point, I didn't want any kids. I didn't want kids. I was never getting married. I didn't want my lifestyle. What I then decided to do was, when I had kids, I always said I would never argue in front of them. So I've never, ever argued in front of my kids. And I won't argue in front of my kids, because I remember the feeling I had when I was younger, in here, literally in here, when my mum and dad would argue, and it was vicious, like, and my dad would get nasty when he was drunk to people, and I always said I wouldn't do it, and I always said I wouldn't learn from my mum and dad's mistakes, but I have, because I haven't been great in relationships. I haven't always thought about the other person. It's a tough one, because you learn from the people around you. I've been married once. I got married in a Muslim ceremony to another woman, which is was the wrong thing to do, but I thought was the right thing to do at the time. I've had multiple relationships, and I think each time I have one, I try and get better. So I try and improve every time I have a relationship, and but sometimes I think I'm scared because of the way I see my mum. Now, don't get me wrong, my dad's a different person today, and he's a great grandfather. He's brilliant. And my mum has met the nicest and softest guy I've ever met. My stepdad Chris is incredible, and treats my mum like a princess, and that's the type of man I'm trying to be. Now, My mum and dad's mistakes were they would live to their means, so we'd always be waiting for the next paycheck. I vowed never to try and do that. And my dad, and just, they should have split up probably 20 years before they did. But they just kept being drawn back to each other, and again, and my dad would, and that really screwed my head a bit of that's normal. The woman does as they're told, the man goes out and does what they want to do, and that's that. It's the way it is. Now, I'm not saying that a terrible childhood. My mum was incredible. My mum's the most amazing woman in the world. I love her to bits, and she's my rock. And she would, her more than anybody else, would bend over backwards to make sure we had everything we could have. Do you know what I mean? We would never went without as kids. It was just, we always dread my dad coming home. So my dad would work away for 3-6 months at a time, and then we were dreading coming home sometimes because there was always be an argument or something, and then drink would be involved, and it was just tough. I don't think I realised how much that affected me until the last couple of years. So I've tried to vow not to do that, and I've also tried to vow to never argue in front of my kids, as I've said. So is the way you're brought up a massive thing? Another thing as well, look, I was brought up with good manners, right? My mum taught me to respect women. So I clash sometimes with my oldest boy. He's 16, thinks he knows everything, and that's where Andy Tate comes in. But I always say to him, no, me and your mum not together, but you respect him. You got one mum, you respect her. That's it. That's the only thing that matters. Because if you don't respect her, you'll lose her one day. You'll lose her one day. That's the key thing. And women having respect for men is key. And this is where the Andrew Tate thing comes in. My son was quite a big fan of his, and I seen his attitude change a little bit. So I started watching some of his videos and looking at some of his stuff. And look, in some aspects, he talks a lot of sense about business and making money, and the way he makes his money might be wrong, but he's clearly a clever guy, right? The way he talks about women is undeniably not acceptable, because if you look at a woman like an object like he does, and he says stuff like, you do as you're told, you'll do this, you'll go and work, you'll be in bed ready for me, you'll cook my dinner, I think that's where he's a bit unhinged and gone wrong. But I think we don't understand as a society how much influence he has on young men. My 16-year-old boys and his friends didn't understand that what he was saying was wrong, or they did understand, but they liked the way he sold it, because he's a great salesman. So I think as true men and as leaders and as fathers, we need to educate, and that's what I did with my son. I educated him in, look, he's saying this, but look at those women that's turned him in. How many women does he have to share about me? What's his relationship like with his mum? And I then talked to him through my relationship with my mum, and he knows that. I see my mum, try and see my mum at least once a week, speak to her as much as I can. She's my rock. And I say, this is, right now at 16, you think your mum's the worst enemy, she will be your best friend. I'm not saying that his entrepreneur spirit is wrong, Andrew Tate, not at all. You want to make money, you go out there, do it. And I truly believe as well, if you believe you can do something, you go and do it. No one should be able to tell you not to. Whether you've got A-levels, doctorates, masters, GCSEs, no, it doesn't matter. You can still go and make something yourself. Stephen Bartlett's a massive advocate for that, as in, he show you what it's like just to leave, drop out of school, drop out of university, multi-millionaire. But that's drive and work ethic. He's not disrespectful to women. That's key. And I think as men and as leaders, we need to step up and really look at how we educate the men around us. And the way we educate the men around us well is the way we treat women. So I've never been a sexist guy, ever. Don't get me wrong, I've been in relationships with the person I'm with has probably done majority of the household chores. But I'm not a typical man either, where I'm like, give me a screwdriver and a hammer and I'll do some stuff. I can't do that rubbish. I can't do it. I'm a businessman, I'm an entrepreneur, but I can also cook. I do most of the cooking in the house. You know what I mean? I will wash up the dishes. I will do my own ironing, and that's why I'm teaching my son. I think the days of the traditional man and woman are gone. I'll be honest. Some people still like it, some people don't. My kids to me are my everything, so I would do everything for them. Like, hence 2.5 hour drive today just to go and watch a 3-hour sports day. but worth it, because the joy on their face, the look on their face when they see you, that's massively worth it to me. So yeah, I can't fault that, but I think we need to really look at, because he's out now, and I don't think he's going back in, and I think he's going to get back on the internet, and he's going to get back on what he's doing, some form. And these young men are very, very, we're in tough times at the moment. There's a cost of living crisis. Jobs are there, but not the jobs that people think. The problem we got with today's generation is they want the best jobs now. Like, they don't want to work for it as much as we have to. And Andrew Tate is saying, don't work for it. I give you a quick rich scheme and get a woman to make sure she picks up after you. That's where I think we need to, as men and as a society, start educating of, actually, you're a team and you should treat women with respect. Most of my leadership team are women. In my companies and what I do, most of my leadership team are women. The three closest people to me in my life are women. My mum, my sisters. Do you know what I mean? I got a brother, but they're the closest people to me. One of my best friends is a woman, because their perspective of things is different. It's massively important to we understand, because to tell you what's happening at the moment is, we end up trying to change the person we're with. We end up trying to change the other person we're with, and then what happens then is we don't become the person we were. And what I mean by that is, right, we will do so much to change rather than educate, that we then end up becoming somebody that the person you fell in love with is not anymore. And that's scary. If you have to change that much to actually please somebody, I don't want to be with a woman that has to change her entire lifestyle to be with me, because I would have fell in love with the woman that she was in the beginning. I want to be with a woman that respects me and respects boundaries and respects that we're in a relationship, so nobody else should really have a chance or even think they have a chance. But that comes from two ways as well. So I in the past have been a bit too friendly with a woman, not romantically interested, but a bit too friendly with somebody, not thinking of how that makes the person I'm with feel. So it's from our voice as well. I work with a lot of women, but I also need to respect sometimes the boundaries of of that being over friendly. Now, there might not be a romantic involvement there, but how does the partner you're with at the time feel if that's happened, and how would you feel if the things were turned? Now, if someone is truly happy, they wouldn't need to feel to get validation from anywhere else. It's as simple as that. But it's the way people are brought up in education. Do you mean? Right now, everything we do right now is all about getting validated on social media. So people post stuff now. It's not a true reflection of their life. It's the version of their life they want you to know. And what they'll do is they'll post something to get enough likes so people think you're good. Why do we care? Years ago, nobody went around knocking doors and going, "Do you like my dress?" No one went knocking doors and going, "Do you like my bikini? Do you like what I'm wearing?" No one did that. So why are we doing it now? Why is social media screwed us up so much? That makes no sense, does it? At all. So we really need to work out and try and figure out a way of how we have a conversation with ourselves and with the people around us to say, do you know what? You just need to validate for yourself and the person you're with, and who cares what everybody else thinks? Do you know what I mean? But when we leave ourselves open to get attention from other people, that's where things go wrong. And that's where the disrespect comes from, and that's where people like Andrew Tate then get into people's heads, because people are looking for somebody else to validate why they're important, and that it's tough. It's a tough old world out there, and people need to stick together. I don't mean to upset anybody on this podcast. I don't, and I hope my parents don't get upset because I've talked about their relationship a little bit. They're both split up now, married to other people. They're happy. That's a good thing. My relationship, both of them, is very good now. But this podcast is about being honest. Now, sometimes it makes sense, sometimes it doesn't make sense. But like I've said before, I don't care if anybody listens. I don't care if anybody likes what I do. This is therapy for me to be able to get things off my chest and have a conversation with myself about stuff that's in my head. Now, that parent thing has been bothering me for a while. The Andrew Tate thing's been bothering me for a while. You know what I mean? And I just needed to get out there and when I get it out there and I record it, I upload it and it's on a podcast and we got some sponsors, but it's just getting it out of my head. It's therapy to me without having to pay for it. So so that very short and sweet this week, actually. They're the 3 things really niggling me. I might do another one towards the end of the week, actually, bit of a bonus episode, but they're the things niggling me more than anything else. Look, I'm gonna love you and leave you there, but just to let you know, like I said, we got Talk Outside the Scrum, Luke Brown on hopefully next week. 2 weeks after that, they're gonna be my business partner. We're gonna talk about how we built a multi-million-pound business, and then made a profit, and then we got some other guests coming on as well. Like and subscribe if you want to. If you don't, that's fine. You'll find us on all the socials, Man Up Podcast. And have a great day, and I'll speak to you soon.